right. Do it. Yo, yo, yo. It's been a while since we got to play.
In real life time, but everybody's been getting all of the delicious goodness along the way. So,
Yes,
but
absolutely.
It's been a hot second or week since Tanya and I have been able to connect.
Yeah, because I was in Egypt.
I'll just state for the record, I do not appreciate when she goes away and she travels, because I don't think she stays as what I told her. I was like, you don't stay as connected as I do. Obviously, we were on a 12 or 13-hour time difference, so there's that. But I'm like, I do not appreciate this. So I'm glad you're back.
I'm glad I'm back too. And just for future reference, I actually would prefer to travel with you, to do Who University travel with David and with you. So on that note, I want to, because of what we're talking about on today's podcast, like how comfortable, how free do we feel to be who we truly are, which is the basis of what you and I explore every day. I want to sort of just take us into a moment of, again, as always, tuning in with our breath and noticing our level of comfort with that breath. As we breathe in and we breathe out, how comfortable are we in our own skin? How easy is it to be who we are? There's a time for me that being me felt really fucking hard. And there wasn't a lot of ease in my breath. There wasn't a lot of freedom, a feeling of safety to be who I am. A deep breath takes a little longer than a quick and shallow breath. So just notice. Like right now, I'm just aware there might be some people listening. They're like, come on, let's get to the good stuff. And I'm sitting here breathing. I remember my first coaching call, actually, where I don't know what it was, but I was almost immediately triggered getting on the phone with her. And I started crying, and I thought, you're paying how much to sit here and cry and breathe? So for those of you that might be needing a hot second to just breathe, I want to invite you to take that hot second. Just take that moment to focus on your breath. How comfortable are you to slow down, take what you need, be present in your body, to know or be aware of how you're feeling in your body, how your breath is landing within your body. And for those of you that are like, hurry up, let's go, I'm just going to invite you to breathe into that idea. Take a hot second. I used to call it 5 fucking minutes. I just need 5 fucking minutes. FFM. So if you hear us talk about FFM, that's what we're talking about. Let's rock and roll, sister.
Let's do it. So obviously, we all know that Tanya's been in Egypt for the last 2 weeks, something like that. It feels like a lifetime. And as I love to travel, one of the things I love about travel is that you're in a different environment.
Yep.
You are not used to the same old. Like basically, the snow globes where you just like shake it all up. That's what I feel like travel does. And I love it. Okay. Some people don't like it as much because for that very reason, right? And as you obviously have changed so much to how you used to travel. I think, would it
Yep.
be fair to say that you might have been one of those people who did not like to travel? Or you like to travel, but it was a very stressful, anxiety ridden experience leading up to and possibly during your travels?
Yes, for sure. It was needing to pack every possible thing that I might not have. It was not knowing if I was going to get in trouble, if I was going to do something wrong, if I was going to break some rule, if I was going to get lost, or like there was going to be language barrier. What would I do? Yeah, it was a hugely anxious, challenging, um, difficult
Yeah.
thing. Um, and I oftentimes felt a little actually afraid of some of the people that I might be encountering. Um, Afraid to go out and try new things, and yeah, yeah, it was
Okay.
definitely
I can understand why
different.
you don't want to travel. Because I mean, the whole point of it's to have fun, right? To see different
Yep,
things, experience different people. So as you were preparing for this trip, you consciously were present with yourself and your body when
yep,
you were packing. Because, and let me go back. The reason why, correct me if I'm wrong, but the reason why you would try to pack everything, you would try to anticipate everything, is because you were not okay with feeling whatever you needed to feel or were going to feel if you left something at home, didn't have it, couldn't get it, whatever, right? It's what are we trying to avoid? What feeling are we trying to avoid? That's why we're trying to control and pack and do things exactly right. If you guys aren't watching on YouTube, in a little pretty box, fitting everything in just so perfectly so we can just feel calm and at ease, right?
right. So my packing strategy, the first time we went out of the country, there was a lot of things I did not know. I wasn't prepared for. And that feeling of not being prepared is extremely uncomfortable for me. Um, so, it was like throw in the unknown and then add to that. This was when I started traveling, was also at a time where I was starting to explore. I had to eat a certain way. I had to exercise a certain way. I had to take a certain medications. I had to be packed and prepared for all that. Can I get these meds in the country? Is there like what paperwork do I need? Am I going to get stopped at a checkpoint? There was just a lot of things that created that anxiety, and some things were in response to having done a trip and felt like I didn't have something, and not having the ease to be like, that's okay. Like, whatever the experience is going to be is okay. Because there were some experiences that didn't feel safe, that didn't feel like they were okay. Like if you were to miss a connection, oh my gosh, we're going to lose a day of vacation. Or if you're going to get stopped in security and they take something or confiscate something. Like I've had enough travel experiences where things like that have gone wrong, and I had held those as being not safe moments, not okay moments. And so it takes an extreme amount of energy to try and anticipate and plan for the things that you can't anticipate and plan for. Yeah. And
So,
not wanting to feel fear, not wanting to feel rejection, not wanting to feel wrong. Oh my God, not wanting to feel wrong. That's a big one, because that's like, if you're wrong, you're not okay.
so
Yeah.
as you're packing, you're making the conscious effort to be present, packing
Hmm.
only what you think you want to take. And tell me, you had a guide, right?
Hmm.
So tell me about, or tell the listeners about packing for the trip. What did you notice on this packing trip versus you kind of already highlighted what it was like before. So this
Yeah.
trip, what was it like?
So this trip, I was noticing we had reached out and asked about some of the customs, about what tipping, about dress, because it is essentially a Muslim country. Um, and I didn't necessarily know fully what all places we were going to go and what the requirements or expectations were there. And so as we were packing and I'm reading things about, oh, you're expected to have your head covered, you're expected to have your shoulders, your elbows, your knees covered. And I'm like, it's hot there and I got to be all covered up. And there was also a part of me that there was old Tanya would have been like, all right, I'll just comply. Newer Tanya has gone through the phase of my teenage phase of you don't tell me what to do, and then trying to find this place of peace within myself. And so when I was hearing about, what was expected as far as what we wear, I was I was finding myself a little challenged, thinking, this isn't how I want to dress. This isn't what feels like me. This isn't necessarily comfortable to be all covered up in the heat. And I'm very particular about feeling restricted in my movements. It's one of the reasons why I don't dive cold water, because all the gear and everything I have to put on me feels like being bundled up. The movie A Christmas Story, I think it's A Christmas Story, comes to mind,
Yeah.
where the kids all bundled up. And yeah, I don't like feeling restricted, and that felt very restrictive. So I was having a little bit of an internal, not battle, but a little bit of an internal struggle to be like, how much do I conform and how much do I just be me?
Yeah.
And so I ended up somewhere around the neighborhood of perhaps 2/3 accommodating Egyptian expectations, which they expect, whoever the
Air
fuck
quotes.
they are,
Yeah.
right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And a third, I'm just going to be me. Yeah. So that was the packing for it. That was the clothing was probably the most challenging part of it.
And coming from that space of, okay, I want to make sure I don't upset anyone, or was it so much of a fitting in, or maybe it was both or all of it, or was it more like, I don't want to upset someone, or I don't want to get in trouble, or what were some of the things that were coming up for you?
The things that were coming up were, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want
Okay.
to do it wrong. Um, Not wanting, like many people, don't appreciate confrontation. And so the idea that I might show up and be told you're inappropriate, that confrontation um, is something that I have been allowing myself to be who I am and getting to decide if I'm like, if they say, you're not appropriate, okay. If that's how you see me, that's fine. I am appropriate. I just won't come in if I'm not accepted to come in. Um, so yeah, there was definitely an element of, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to be rejected. I don't
Mhm.
want to create a scene in the group.
That's good.
Like if
I was going to
everybody
ask
else,
is,
yep, if everybody else has complied, what's
yeah,
wrong with you?
odd man out, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
you don't fit in.
Yeah. So did you, because I think this is important for listeners, because I think a lot of times we think we have to get to that place for it to actually happen, for us to experience what we think we might experience. So did you ever play with the idea in your head and the feelings in your body. Okay, so the person at the mosque tells me I'm not allowed to come in. What does that bring up in me? How might I feel? What decisions might I want to make? Did you kind of role play, for lack of a better word, what some of these scenarios might be? And not to take your mind, this is important, not to take your mind on this rabbit hole, right? Of all of the worry, but also practicing, I would still be okay if I was told I couldn't come in, or I could have a conversation and I could make another decision on what I wanted to wear at that moment, or things of that sort.
So typically, I do practice these kinds of things you and I have talked about. I practice dying frequently. And when I talk about practicing dying, it's like facing those fears that we have of being rejected, denied, deemed unacceptable. And so ahead of the trip, I did not practice that. I did, however, end up practicing it on the trip because other situations ended up presenting themselves. There was a point on the trip midway where everyone was buying galabias, which is this kind of like robe clothing dress that was considered in their culture acceptable, long sleeves, long dress. And everyone, air quotes again, was buying galabias. And I was like, I don't want to. I don't want to buy a piece of clothing that I never intend to wear again. And it wasn't about the money, because I really don't give a shit about that. It was about, I think I had even shared with you in text, I had this moment where I imagined that my friends were all like, oh, this is fun for us all to dress like each other and to, in the custom of the Galabia, for the party that we might have on the boat. And I was thinking, is that fun for me? Like, what do I consider fun? And so I played with that concept of being the only person. And I knew my husband wasn't also going to buy one, but playing with the idea of being the only person who didn't comply with that. And how I was going to be the party pooper, the one that spoiled it for everyone, or you can't be in the picture because you're the only one not wearing a galabia. So I played with that. And I also had another moment a little later in the trip, which we can get to later on in this podcast, about conforming, fitting in, or not fitting in. So yeah, I did play with that concept a little bit. I also, on a side note, I so appreciated our Egyptologist that we had on the Nile Queen. So good. Mahmoud was delivering the story about the Egyptians. And one of the things that I loved the most when he was talking about how Egyptians believed in resurrection, or believed in the afterlife, he was talking about how they studied the sun, that they saw it as like being born every day in the east and then dying in the west. And they imagined what demons and monsters the sun might have to face in order to rise again the next day. They practiced dying. They practiced like what demons they had to fight. They also studied the moon. They studied the Nile and its yearly flooding. So I did practice a little bit with the galabias, the idea of being rejected, not fitting in, not complying, not doing what everybody expected of me.
What I love about this is, and you didn't say it exactly, but you actually gave yourself the space to ask the questions. I think so often we just go along because that's what we've either been conditioned to do, or we don't even think about like, what choice do I want to make in this matter, right? Versus giving ourselves a hot second to be like, do I actually want to do this? Is this actually fun for me?
Mm-hmm.
And do I have a desire to do this versus, or am I making this decision from a place of, from fear, like I don't want to be, made fun of, or party pooper, or whatever might come up that, we experience that then causes us to do something we don't really want to do in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
and it's those subtle little moments. You and I talk a lot with our clients about the 1% or even the 0.5%.
yeah,
It's those subtle little moments. Some people, I think, expect that it's the big thing. It's the big decisions. It's the hard decisions where change occurs. But really, it's in those microscopic moments. It's in those little subtle things. Like, how hard is it to just buy a Galabia? You can get rid of
of
it.
course. Yeah.
Like, how hard is
Simple.
that? And it's those little moments. So like, I'm practicing being just who I am and being okay with that, and being able to say no when I want to say no and say yes when I want to say yes, from a completely authentic to me place. And so those little moments where it's easy for somebody to be like, oh, come on, one of our friends said, no pressure. And
Total pressure.
sometimes that feels like a little pressure, like everybody's doing it, why aren't you? And that was never said to us, but yeah, sometimes it's those little things
It's very
that
subtle.
just erode, just very subtle erosion, but that erosion builds up over time. So it's really those small moments where we most need to practice, because sometimes it's that gray area that's really easy to be like, really, is this a big deal? Come on.
Yeah.
But that leads to a pattern of behavior of conforming, giving in, starting to erode those little pieces.
So you get there and you realize, you go in the mosque or you go where you've been told, you're supposed to wear these things. And one thing I also want to comment on is, this is what Tanya and I were talking about the podcast before the podcast started, is when you are receiving information from other people, you're receiving it from the lens in which they have beliefs and thoughts and feelings around that, right? So you might have had someone who had a very strong belief of like, I don't want to be wrong. I don't want to get upset. Or, in the Western culture, we're so liability and litigious that it comes from, I don't want to be held liable if something happens, right? So we err on the side of extreme caution because we're so afraid someone might come back at us, or someone might have a negative experience, air quote, negative experience because, of what I said. So be mindful of, okay, we're getting this information from the filter of whatever this person thinks and believes.
Yes. I was just going to say, even I was having a conversation with our friends that we live with right now, and she had mentioned going to like Singapore. Well, you could be arrested for disposing of your gum in the wrong place. And just aware that oftentimes there is a lot of fear around doing it wrong, being responsible, like, oh, you gave me this information. And so to the question that I think you're getting in the pipeline, well, let me just let you ask it.
Well, first of all, I just want to side note on Singapore with the gum. I don't chew gum. I know lots of people do. And I don't ever put gum except in the trash can, because that's where it needs to go. And it's just like this idea that we have, right? Like, well, you're going to go in jail, which I've heard that a lot from a lot of people. That's probably true. And why aren't we throwing it in the trash can where it's supposed to? That's just my very minimal mind thinking. Okay. So back to Egypt, you go to a mosque and you go to where
Yes.
you think you're supposed to dress a certain way, and you
Mhm.
notice what?
I noticed that there are other people that haven't necessarily dressed that way. There are some people that they had available like some robes or some other things that you could put on to go into the mosque. They put booties over everybody's shoes, which was fine. But there were some people that, that wasn't a concern for them. And there was nobody standing at the door saying, no, you cannot come in. They may have gotten some side eye. I don't know. I wasn't them. But I did notice there were other people that either didn't have their head covered or their choice of how they covered their head was creative. Um, and I was like, "Ah, I could have done that." So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And noticing, you and I always talk about like us going first, right? If everyone,
Mhm.
and for our listeners, I am not advocating go the opposite way because someone tells you to go this way, right? I'm not advocating for that. I'm also saying to be ourselves 100% of the time. And it's a practice, right? That we are working on and, figuring out how to do on a consistent basis. But what I think is really insightful is you could do all of the checklist things. You know how I feel about checklists. You
Mhm.
could dress the way that they want you to dress, and you could follow all of the things that they want you to do, but you could still put out that energy or that behavior. This is where I go back to like at the basic level, we are all humans, right? And
Mhm.
how are we treating these people? How are we treating our guides? How are we treating like honoring, like if the person at the mosque was like, no, you can't come in, okay, so what do I need to wear? And then redeciding and making a decision to either go in and honor that because you want to and you're interested, and or not. And we can do all of the things that we're told to do, but we can still, for lack of a better word, be an asshole in this while we're doing it. Or who are we as a person, whether we're deciding to, modify our clothing or not.
Exactly. Yep.
And I think I mentioned this in the last podcast, I think, but that has always been something that's kind of irked is the word that's coming to mind because I can't think of a different word. But human to human, how are we treating each other? Not what we wear or what we say, or if the energy behind how we act is not from a loving, compassionate place, people pick up on
Mhm.
that, right? So
Yep.
do you want to elaborate more on what you noticed around fitting in, not fitting in, all of the all of the things that your brain told you?
So the Galabia party, I chose not to wear a Galabia. I had brought a long dress and a scarf um, that I wore, and I had so much fun that night. Everything was fine. I wasn't kicked out of the picture just because I wasn't wearing a Galabia. Neither was David. Um, and it just felt good to be me. Um, but then we also had a situation where, again, it came up when one of the people that we were traveling with uh, turned up with COVID. Now, they apparently had brought COVID tests with them. They were, this particular couple was probably not unlike other people, very, very concerned and fearful, and had gotten extra boosters to go and all of that. But that really isn't the relevant part of this. I practice, you know this, for our listeners, I practice my wellness from within me by managing fear. Because when we are in a state of fear, we are in a state of survival. And when we are in a state of survival, our immune system is compromised. And I know personally for myself that I have an incredibly strong immune system. The last several years of me doing the fear work that I have has gifted me with a well-being that I never imagined I could have. So I have, as soon as they lifted the mask mandate, I'm like, I'm a no for a mask. And when this person ended up with COVID and they tested and they pretty much announced to the whole group, this person went into isolation, stayed in his room the entire rest of the trip. And there was, I can't remember who it was, but one of the people on our trip mentioned, oh, we should all wear masks now in any of the confined areas, in the hallways, in the salon. And I thought, but I don't want to. I'm not afraid. I'm not. And what I had, Mahmoud and I were actually having a conversation in the salon when the wife came out and said, my husband has tested positive for COVID. And she was like, what do we do? He's going to isolate. I'll separate myself from the group. I'll sleep outside up on the deck. And I said, I'm not concerned. We had just been playing cards with them the night before in close proximity, and I said, it's not that I don't believe in COVID. I absolutely do. And I believe that there are some people that have a high degree of fear around it. And that high degree of fear is compromising their immune systems and making them more vulnerable to being sick. But in that moment, what I noticed when the comment was made about we should all wear masks in the confined areas or in small spaces, I thought, I don't want to. And that was a moment for me to practice a couple of things. It was that moment for me to practice being okay within myself, to choose not to wear a mask. Even my husband was wearing a mask. He was doing it out of, as he said, like out of respect. Consideration, right? Because my husband is always I've got to be considerate for everyone else, sometimes to his own detriment. Like I don't consider myself, but I'll consider other people. And so I did actually practice that. I had a moment where I sat kind of meditating and imagining that everybody on the boat hated me, that everybody on the boat.
For the listeners, I'm curious, were you the only one that chose not to mask?
No.
Okay. But just notice how much your brain was still telling you.
Oh yeah. My brain was still wanting to, and it was light, way lighter than it used to be. Of course. But my brain was wanting to tell me, everybody on the boat's going to hate you. Everybody on the boat's going to think it's like, if they get sick, it's your fault because you didn't mask up. Like maybe you're the carrier. Maybe you're the black sheep that's carrying around this thing and giving it to everybody because you won't be considerate to mask up. Or just also aware that there were a lot of people that were like, I can't get this. I won't be okay if I get this. It's going to ruin my vacation. This is going to, whatever stories they had going on around that fear. And so that actually was another moment of, well, am I going to fit in? Am I going to comply or do what everyone else expects or what I think they expect?
Yeah.
And it wasn't
because you didn't ask them.
No, I didn't take a poll on the boat. Like, who's expecting everyone to wear a mask?
But
So
no, but I
yeah,
say that because I think that that's important to say, because I think a lot of people make assumptions, right? Your brain is giving you all of these, even though that they're light because you've worked on it a lot, your brain is giving you what everyone else is thinking about you. But we don't actually know until we ask the person or the people, what are you actually thinking? And that might be true. And sometimes it might not be, but sometimes we just take away, like we're on the runaway train where our mind just takes us to the places, right? And it may not even be true. So
yep, yep. So that was another experience and opportunity for me to practice just doing me. And me is not, this sounds a little flippant, but I practice dying on a regular basis. And the dying isn't the hard part. The dying isn't the scary part. I've been I've been in situations where I've somewhat been to the other side. I've had the experience of death. Um, Trying to commit suicide when I was 13, being on the telly and pretty sure that I was going to drown. Um, the death part isn't the hard part. It's the fear of it, and it's the living that is the challenging piece. It's the allowing ourselves to be who we are. It's allowing, um, being aware when the fear comes up and wants to tell us you don't fit in, you're different, you're weird, people don't understand you. Um, yeah, that's that's the thing that tends to take a lot of our energy.
I think two things. One, what a gift, because there might have been someone on that. And whether it's COVID or you deciding not to wear certain clothes or whatever it might be, the gift I always think it is when, you know, when one of us has the courage to be who we truly are and to honor ourselves, then we give, or it gives permission, I should say, if people allow it, it gives others the permission to honor who they are, right? Which is such, that's everything, I think. And the flip side of the man that had COVID, it's like we get so concerned about others, right? That we forget about, well, what about the people that are experiencing what they're experiencing, whether it's him having COVID and being singled out and having to himself quarantine for however long he did, or you being, for lack of a better word, quarantined in your mind, you thought, right, that you were going to be quarantined away from the group, from not wearing or not conforming and fitting in because you chose not to, right? And human to human compassion, love, gentleness,
Mhm.
where is all of us working on building that muscle for the people that decide that they don't want to? And when we can drop the right or the wrong, right? Because that's just judgment. In order for something to be right, you have to have judgment about it. And we can just honor that someone wishes to honor themselves. If we can strip away all of the stories that we have about why someone's doing what they're doing, and we can just look at it from the sense of they're just honoring themselves, like that's all that we story it with. How can we be more supportive to each human that honors themselves? I think there's so much in the world as this is right, this is wrong. We have such polarities of so many different topics. But what I think is fascinating is we're ultimately saying the same thing. We're honoring what feels good and what is important to us.
Mhm.
And if we can look at it from that lens versus malicious, or they're trying to get us, or they're, whatever we story it with, um
Yep.
I guess that's like, that is for sure my desire for Who University, right? Like honoring everyone, being able to honor themselves. And if it doesn't agree with what you think they should be doing, it's more so just an honoring of themselves. um yeah.
Yeah. The experience was so good on a multitude of levels. I mean, aside from getting to see things that were 3, 4 plus thousand years old, and having a guide that was passionate about the, you know, being the storyteller of the past, um, and sharing the way he did, the ability to just observe other humans, and myself included, right? To be introspective to what I was experiencing, and knowing that I'm not the only one that has these fears, that has these um, questions or challenges of, can I just be who I am? Uh, what fears are running my life? What restrictions do I have that seem like someone else is placing on me, but really I'm allowing them to be placed on myself? And then also the awareness of, I'm just going to be me,
Mm-hmm.
and I can let you just be you, because that's the other gift. When we can truly just be ourselves, like, I don't have to get you to see my point of view. I don't have to get
Nope.
you to understand me. I don't have to get you to believe the way I believe. And I can let you, like, in my allowance of that for myself, I am also allowing you to just believe what you believe, and honor that your journey is your journey. The choices that you make are for you. Um, like this human experience, I think, would serve us a lot. It would be a lot more joyful and fun and playful if we could just allow one another to have our experience and respect each other as humans. So I got to practice that a lot on this trip. I got to practice being me. And in the moments where I chose not to be me, or I chose to sort of adapt or alter myself, I also got to just experience that from a different perspective than I have in the past, because those alterations used to come unconsciously out of fear. Whereas now it was more like playing with being me, and sometimes playing with not being me, or altering me a little bit, and seeing how that felt.
Also, at
Complete.
the core of this is you always choosing, right? We are
Yes.
always choosing, we are always deciding, whether we are aware of it or not. You know, like when you said about David, you know, sometimes he conforms. If he's aware that he's conforming for others, that's very different than thinking I have to conform because I don't have a choice, right? And I think a lot of times we think we are doing something because we have to, when it's a choice, and do we want to do it and conform or whatever it might be. So
All of life is a choice, and sometimes we can't see it. So
yeah,
I love I love illuminating the fact that every single thing in life is a choice.
and slowing down long enough to see that.
Yes, that's a whole nother podcast. Boy,
Yeah.
tell you what, I learned a little bit about how I want to travel in the future, and how I'm like, this doesn't fit me anymore.
So this podcast was about Egypt, not about Egypt. So if you could summarize in 3 words, your trip to Egypt, what would it be?
Can I do it in 3?
That's why I said 3. I'm like, because I know she's going to be like, can I do it in 3? Yeah, do it in 3, my Manny Jen.
Exploring authentic me.
Mm, it's so good.
Yeah,
It's what we're doing all the time, right?
every freaking day.
So, anything else?
Nope, that was good play.
Okay. Okay, my friends. Until next time, thanks for listening and playing. Love you all.
Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.